Good evening. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming in this evening. My name is John Bonning. I'm the Commercial Director here at the Building Centre. As always, just before we start, a quick bit of housekeeping. Please can you ensure your mobiles are switched off. And we've got no planned fire drills this evening, so if you hear an alarm, please leave the way you came in, and the Building Centre staff will direct you out of the building. Retrofit 23, hopefully you've had a chance to look around the main exhibition upstairs. If not, I would recommend you take the opportunity after the event or come back on another day with colleagues. I'm pleased to see that we have our exhibition curator with us this evening, Lucy Bullivant. So thanks, Lucy, for coming in. And I'm sure Lucy will be happy to give you a private tour if you so wish as well at some point. I haven't asked her that. For those of you not familiar with the Building Centre, we are an independent forum for the built environment. We're a non-for-profit organisation sitting below the Built Environment Trust, which is an educational charity. So it allows us to put these talks and events on. Any profits we generate, we put back into the programme of the exhibitions and the talks that we put on. We're running weekly talks, weekly webinars on a Tuesday lunchtime, and in-person events on Wednesday evening. We're going to have a short break over the August period, and then we will resume the talks again in September. We're actually extending the exhibition due to demand into October. So please keep an eye on the website, buildingcentre.co.uk. We're uploading all the talks on there at the moment. A quick thank you to the speakers for giving up their time this evening. So that's John Christopher, Lily Green, and Ralph Bertram. Ralph is going to chair the event tonight. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session, so please hold your questions until the end. And with that, I'm going to pass you over to Ralph, who is the Sustainable Facilitator at Enfield Council, the Retrofit Asset Manager, Sustainability Lead at Meridian Water, and a Joint Interim Head of Climate Action and Sustainability across the Council. So quite how Ralph manages to do all that, I don't know, but you're in very good hands this evening. So Ralph, please come.
So thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Nice to see you all. So this is Retrofit Meets, and this particular session is about community action. A little bit, I'm chairing it with talking to John and Lily later on, but just a little bit about myself. Thanks so much for that interaction, for that introduction. So I began Enfield Council about 4 years ago, was 18 years before that at Foster & Partners, and with the help of Public Practice, who is here, Lily, please everybody should speak to Lily later on, about transitioning to local authority work. And yet, as it says, the regeneration water is Meridian Water, and particularly relevant to this is really on asset management, the work on asset management, which is a really boring title. If anybody could think of something better, well, actually retrofit is a bit better than asset management, but working to reduce emissions from our 16,000 council homes to save residents money and to make them more resilient for the future, as well as the decarbonisation. I've done some deep retrofit of my own home with internal insulation, air source heat pumps and solar panels. So I've got some sort of relevant experience through, from an emotional point of view of going through it, ourselves. And I'm also a part of a community sustainability group within our residents association that we have to encourage exchange of knowledge within neighbours in the area wanting to do the same thing. So that's enough about me, because it's not about me. It's about Retrofit Meets. It's an in-person series of panel events that connects people through themes and topics relevant to deep retrofit of homes at scale. And we're delighted to have you taking part. This evening talk series by the Building Centre will feature guest speakers presenting a project or provocation, followed by a question and answer session to the audience. So please reserve your questions until after the presentations, and I'm don't necessarily believe this, but I'm told to say we kindly request you'll focus your questions specifically on individual speakers and aim to avoid making statements. But I'm chairing, so I'll decide. And I may focus it back on you, because there's always, I love the trick of making, really smart questions, but actually you know the answer and you know how to contribute better. So, but yeah, please do that. We'll see how it goes. I'll cut you off if you're just making statements. So today we have Lily Green, creative partner at Hubbub, which is a charity for environmental change. She will discuss the process of making homes more energy efficient through community efforts and share Hubbub's Big Street Upgrade in Glasgow, a project that is run in partnership with Over Energy Solutions and Glasgow City Council. So she's going to start off, and then following up is John Christopher. John is a green architect, and he will discuss Retrofit Basel Heath, a community group that builds upon previous green initiatives spanning over 15 years in the diverse inner city area of Birmingham. John Christophers will talk about his work with the group and ideas that neighbourhood scale retrofit can't be top-down. It must be community-led and must incorporate collective street-by-street action. I haven't seen any of these presentations, and I'm very excited by it. And I may not be pronouncing, in a rubbish southern way, I may not be pronouncing Balsall, not Balsall, Balsall Heath properly. So, apologies for that. But Lily, would you like to come up and take it away? Thank you very much.
Right, hello. I'm Lily Green, and it's lovely to be here on Wednesday evening, chatting to you all. So I'm kicking things off by telling you a bit more about the charity I work for, Hubbub. I'm a creative partner there, and some of the work we've been doing in the space around energy and some projects we've run over the last few years, and now our first foray into retrofitting. So we're new to the topic. I'm not here as the retrofit expert by any means. That's John's job on the panel. But I'd love to share some early insights from our street-level retrofit trial that we've been running for the past year in Glasgow. It's called the Big Street Upgrade. So, first of all, for those who aren't familiar with us, Hubbub is a creative environmental charity, and we're all about inspiring action that's good for the environment and for everyone. So we run campaigns that tackle environmental issues with practical solutions that work for individuals, community groups, and businesses. And crucially, our work is not aimed at environmentalists or activists, because there are other charities who already do that brilliantly. For us, it's around trying to reach a mainstream audience, so people who might care about the environment, but they're juggling all sorts of other issues and things in their life, so money, family, jobs, health, and so on. So we talk about the things that people care about, the food we eat, the clothes we wear, our homes, which we'll talk a lot about today, and our local green spaces, and so on. So our work spans across a whole range of different topics, including food. That's where I have my food hat on, and half of my work goes. Waste, fashion, but homes and consequently energy use is a key focus for us. So to pinch a stat from the exhibition, we need to retrofit 2,466 homes a day to meet net zero targets, to make our homes more comfortable and more energy efficient. So given the scale of the issue, we know that there's obviously more that the government needs to do at a government level. However, alongside this, a 2022 House of Lords report stated that 32% of emissions reductions up to 2035 are in the hands of citizens and households. So that's where Hubbub comes in. Behaviour change is a huge part of reaching net zero and bringing people on board to make the changes we need to reach net zero. And what we found is, in tandem with this, we're already seeing shifts in behaviour sparked by the energy crisis. So, for example, in our recent polling with Census Wide, looking into actions people are already taking on the environment, we found 65% of people are already reducing their energy use. So what does that look like in terms of projects? The first is a project I was part of in 2022 called the Smarter Living Challenge, and we partnered with BT and looked to test how digital technology might help households live smarter with their energy, food and water use. So we recruited 60 households and worked with them in a 3-month trial as an online community to take on different challenges, share ideas and learn from each other. And we found that technology helped to visualize usage, cut wastage and set prompts for better behaviors that they wanted to take on. So collectively, the group took on 448 new actions as a result of the trial. Next up in energy projects, we have the Craven Energy Project, which was working with Craven Council in the Yorkshire Dales, and this was to help residents reduce their energy and look at enabling them to potentially consider retrofitting their homes either now or in the future. So we spoke to 10 community and/or environmental groups, and we built up an understanding of the types of messaging which would resonate for this particular audience. So in the Yorkshire Dales, it was around preserving natural heritage, talking about homes fit for the future, pride in your home, and we presented these recommendations for the council to take forward and apply to their retrofit strategy. So on to the Big Street upgrade, which is currently underway. So why did we want to work on this street-wide experiment? As I mentioned, looking at retrofitting homes is a new area for Hubbub, but we observed through our work with communities that the energy crisis was coming up again and again and was completely at the forefront of people's minds. And people were absolutely willing to do more to shield themselves from the energy crisis, but they weren't necessarily able to do that. So through our research, conversations in space, and our early insights gathering, we quickly highlighted that community engagement was the issue that was often talked about as the missing piece of the puzzle. But as John pointed out in our catch-up before this talk, what does that mean? What does community engagement mean? And he doesn't like the term. So we were also curious in this trial to really delve into what it means to work with the community and how can we enable, facilitate and embolden them to engage in what's possible for them in their homes. And actually, does the current retrofit landscape really work in practice for people? So what we wanted to do was run an in-depth trial following people's experience, an honest experience from start to finish, to show the ups and downs, the end result, the less glamorous parts of retrofit, and whether this might be a way to build a movement around retrofitting. So we took inspiration from a lot of work that's already out there, and we suspected that in order to be able to retrofit the UK's homes at the scale that's needed, a community-led approach could be the way to do it, both logistically and from a behavioural insights perspective, which is Hubbub's bread and butter. So logistics-wise, we suspected doing it street by street in terms of working with contractors and making the process much more seamless, and doing it at scale would work well. And they'd also potentially have bargaining power. And through economies of scale, we could bring financial benefits to the groups. Then from a behaviour change perspective, from the previous trials we'd run, we suspected that, or we knew that peer-to-peer learning was really motivating, and people wanted to see people like them in situations relevant to their lives, see them involved in a project, and even if they were new to the topic, that could be really motivating for them to stay a part of it. But importantly, it could be a huge flop. And we were very prepared for that. We were prepared to fail, but we wanted to start a trial and see what the results were and share the results, whatever they might be. So to make this happen, we teamed up with, this was back in September of last year, with OVO Energy Solutions, who are part of OVO Energy, the energy company, but run their retrofitting service. And they were also interested in testing this model from their experience working with homes. Our criteria for street selection was a mix of income levels, an energy efficiency rating below a C, and just having a sense of community, like at least know your neighbours and at least be kind of doing things on the ground together. So we had 15 applications come through and eventually settled on 2 streets in Kelvindale in Glasgow, and have currently 28 households signed up to the trial. We also, crucially, hired a community coordinator called Claire, who's part of the team, very much in our project discussions, but she's one of the residents in the trial. So we want to make sure that the community is absolutely at the table, their voice is heard, and she's on the ground to support people through this trial. So we launched officially in January this year and brought residents together in an online group and run events to enable them to get to know each other and be on board with the project. This kicked off our insight gathering phase. So Hubbub ran a series of interviews with all the households to find out more about what they were most interested in having done, their current knowledge levels on the topic, and then any barriers to getting started. So some of those insights I'm going to share with you very shortly. But just to bring you up to speed on the full timeline for the project, OVO was then to run a full home review for all of these households. Each home would get a full home retrofit plan from insulation and renewable energy, whatever it might be, with options, cost and emissions reduction estimates. Then we'd run a series of workshops and Q&As, and they'd come together collectively to decide what, both individually and then any shared interests and what they'd like to get. From there, that would enable OVO to assess what types of funding they might be able to unlock. So that's things like GBIS, and I'm pleased to say as of earlier this week, about 14 are eligible for GBIS funding, so that's very exciting. But also further discounts that might come from doing this collectively, anything they can negotiate on their behalf, speaking to local authorities, and so on. So I am pleased to be able to share some of our insights from those early interviews, and I'd be really interested to see, I presume you're all working in retrofit in some respect, so it'd be interesting to see if that chimes with what you found in your experience. So the main barriers, contractors again. The first main barrier we found was contractor wariness. So when we were interviewing our 28 households, they'd had bad experiences in the past, there was immense distrust, and also a problem of receiving a huge range of quotes. So someone said they got a quote for £5,000 compared to £12,000 to upgrade their windows. And they said, well, which one do I go with? Do I go with the bargain one and then be nervous that it's, you know, super cheap and I've scrimped on it, or do I go for the expensive one and then be upset to not have gone cheaper? So that deterred them from taking anything on. And in fact, the only ones who have had things done have got someone in the industry that they know, and a good recommendation, it goes a huge way. Otherwise, it's just too much of a leap of faith. Complexity of the topic, perhaps unsurprisingly, and this is an audience who have applied to take part in this trial. They're relatively clued up on the topic, but even so, it's that fear that this is really complex and I'm going about this on my own, and there's loads of conflicting information online, and it's incredibly general. So you might get to grips with a certain measure or feel like you might take that next step, but you don't know if it's exactly right for your home. There's also a huge distrust in funding, so there's the worry that things will drop off, or that it might potentially be a scam. People had been talking about cold calling a lot, about solar panels. And also that they might make a decision now, which might have implications further down the line and mean that they are blocked from further funding. So for our final phase, when we are up and running and get to give them their home reviews, we'll be doing a final interview process to assess their experience, walk them through any measures that they want to take on, and do our impact measurement. But these are the sorts of things that this is what we do in our projects. It's insight gathering and then testing an approach. So these are the sorts of things that we really think we want to test in our communications and our behavioural insights. So 4 takeaways and 4 things we want to test. Retrofit. People don't like it. It's a very all-encompassing term, and actually it's much better to kind of simplify it and actually explain what you mean. So our sense is that if we disentangle talking about retrofit in this really all-encompassing way and actually start with the first rung in the ladder and say insulation or draft proofing, that'll be much more appealing for this group. We want to make it relevant, so they had a lot of shared characteristics and common questions that were coming up repeatedly, so we want to play on that a lot more. And we think that can be a real strength of this sort of project. So many of them said they had cavity wall insulation from many, many years ago and they didn't know if it was still doing a job. and they wanted their windows upgrading, but they've got stained glass windows, so they didn't know what that meant in that context. People found it quite weird to bring it up with their neighbours. They just said it feels a bit awkward, it's not a natural conversation starter. So I think there's a role for organisations like Hubbub and other groups. My Society are doing a lot with their Neighbourhood Warmth platform to facilitate those conversations and make it less strange and worth bringing up with your neighbourhood. And then lastly, talking about what they care about, so starting with what matters. They pretty much across the board all care about the environment in some respect, but cost has to come first. So that's fine. They're taking action on the environment and on climate change, but if we start with the cost savings and make sure they really see the financial benefit, then that's fine. So to wrap up, I think I'll touch on what the ambition is, because I presume that's what's going to come up in the questions. So this is a trial. This is very early stages, and with these insights, we might well have them all debunked and completely flipped when we get to the end of the trial. But we'll share the results, whatever they may be, and then we'll put forward the recommendations to whoever seems relevant. So it might be influencing at a policy level, it might be working with a business, and the dream of dreams would be, if it works, to scale this up, roll this out street by street, and keep doing this with OVO Energy Solutions if it's something that works. So that might be a pilot, and then that might be something that rolls out further. But thank you so much for listening, and see you in the panel.
Well, thank you very much to the organisers, and huge thanks to Lucy, particularly, I think, the inimitable Lucy Bullivant, for curating this exhibition. So, I have a question. What if the climate transition and retrofit of our homes and streets were designed, owned and governed by the people who live there? A bit radical, you may say, but this is the central proposition we explored at the Retrofit Reimagined Festival, a 4-day festival last summer, co-created with Civic Square, Dark Matter Labs, the Architects Climate Action Network, and salute to those who are here from that today, Zero Carbon House and Retrofit Balsall Heath. And complete credit that I think there isn't a separate session about the Retrofit Reimagined Festival, a sort of a talking session. So part of what I'm saying is content, completely sort of credit to all those collaborators. So I'm going to cover some introduction on the why now and the what of retrofit, the multiple values of the home, the urban geography of Balsall Heath, and how a group of us are imperfectly trying to reimagine retrofit as a community-led neighbourhood project that's much more about much more than just insulation. I have a cameo appearance and 3 world exclusives to share with you tonight. So first, why now? Many of us will have seen the comments from no less than 3 Conservative grandees in the last few weeks, Chris Skidmore, Zach Goldsmith and Lord Deben. Totally inadequate was one of the comments I noted down. The net zero transition requires urgent carbon reductions now. And Ed Hawkins' now familiar climate stripes on the left show temperature changes over the last century. The 5 future scenarios on the right, top to bottom, show, if you like, the space of possibilities in the uncertainty of temperature overshoots, and are contextualized with the 70-year lifespans below. So a 3-year child alive today, born in 2020, will be 70 years old in 2090. We need to think much further ahead, I suggest, than current debates. And I was pleased to see the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, many of you may have seen this month, published a very poignant letter to his granddaughter's granddaughter. Now, we're probably in the room, nearly everyone aware, buildings are responsible for nearly half of UK carbon emissions if construction industries, manufacturing and transport is properly included. Half of that is from our homes, which alone would blow the entire UK carbon budget, even to the inadequate current targets. 91 percent of our buildings are demolished prematurely, and a staggering 62% of UK waste is from construction. So the greenest building is definitely the one that already exists. However, beguiling new swanky zero carbon buildings will not be enough. We must reuse and retrofit the existing buildings for that reason. So secondly, so that's why now. Secondly, what do we mean by this ungainly word retrofit? And in parenthesis, when we were starting Retrofit Balsall Heath, about 30 different names were put into a hat, and a big community group voted on them, and the name that came out was Retrofit Balsall Heath. But what do we mean? And what does it mean for Balsall Heath homes? The usual definition is to insulate the walls, floors, roofs, windows, etc. The UK's old leaky homes, the worst in Europe, to stop all the drafts, put in heat recovery ventilation and low energy fittings. So that's the top of this slide on the right. I would add 2 more steps: renewable energy through PV solar electric panels, perhaps PVT, PV thermal combined heat pumps, etc. to supply the greatly reduced. We've reduced the energy needs then to supply those energy needs. Because in fact 85%, amazingly, of our homes are still heated by fossil fuels, trapping us into unsustainable demand for increasingly expensive, insecure and polluting heat. And the third thing is the wider sustainability piece, to look at improving biodiversity, rainwater harvesting and those much wider things. So this Balsall Heath retrofit story perhaps starts 15 years ago with cameo appearance, the zero carbon house in Balsall Heath, which isn't part of this talk. It is in the exhibition upstairs, but it's a starting point for this story. Completed in 2009. On the right is the ordinary 2-up, 2-down 1840 terraced house, extended to the left and above. Both the new and the old parts of the building are certified to the Code for Sustainable Homes True Zero Operational Carbon Standard. And although that code was withdrawn by the government 8 years ago, and we still await even consultation on a replacement, it arguably represents, I would say, with Passive House, the sort of level we need to achieve. The figures on this slide are the energy use in kilowatt hours per square metre of floor space, and as you can see, the monitored performance over a decade shows radical reductions in both heating and overall energy use, which can and have, and I suggest must be achieved. So there are solar roof panels, both electric and hot water, which have met all the home's energy needs, plus another 40% extra. So rather than eating up resources like most buildings, this one actually produces more energy that it consumes. A new paradigm, if you like, for the most carbon-intensive part of the UK. And it highlights, I hope, that the most powerful means of slashing carbon emissions are already proven and available. And natural reclaimed building materials, credit to the Architects Climate Action Network, natural building materials for this, are used throughout the zero carbon house, with the benefits of both much lower embodied carbon and far better moisture and vapour permeability in the construction. So, after the why and the what, I'd like us now to consider the value of the home and the multiple benefits for health and jobs and skills and decarbonisation and community building. Shockingly, our homes are making us ill. And tragically, as we've all read, I'm sure, children like Awab Ishaq have died because of cold, mouldy homes causing respiratory and other diseases. Calvin Poe from Dark Matter Labs collaborated beautifully on the Retrofit Reimagine Festival. We said we want to make visible the multiple benefits, co-benefits, make visible the benefits. So he looked at the social, environmental, economic, systemic and health value of the home. People's physical health is badly affected by poor housing with mould and damp and condensation, and their mental health by worry about massive bills and the difficulty of keeping them in good repair, and perhaps powerlessness in the face of climate and other intersecting crises. And so, if we look at this, we've got the underperforming house in the middle, and these impacts, these impacts on humidity and damp and cold and overheating, etc. And those cascade out then to a whole lot of other impacts on asthma, respiratory illnesses, heat stress, other diseases and so forth. Those are the secondary issues. The tertiary issues that Calvin mapped are then public health liability issues, issues around social inequality, economic inequality, etc. And those are then picked up by these liability holders for these escalating risks. This was done for the festival in Birmingham, so these are the local Birmingham City Council, the Severn Trent Water Authority, the West Midlands Police, the Integrated Care System, etc., etc. And there's even further a national one, and some of these departments insist on changing their names. But you can see that there are so many impacts of the house. And I think what I really want to say today is that we can reverse these. So properly accounting for all these different impacts, we've got. If we look at this through perhaps the lens of the donut economic, reversing all these impacts, I think is an incredibly powerful example of the fresh thinking that we need. Kate Raworth's 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist subtitle, looking at the happy donut between the ecological ceiling on the outside and the social foundation on the inside. And Kate has worked with the donut globally and at a city level with Toronto, Amsterdam, etc. But in Birmingham, we're really pleased that she's working and experimenting with Civic Square and with us with this neighbourhood level donut economics. And we've inherited perhaps an economy which is divisive and degenerative and extractive by default, especially in construction. A circular economy means reusing and retrofitting, and Kate Raworth speaks of replacing the last century goal of endless growth with a new model of thriving in balance, distributive and regenerative by design, restoring, repairing, retrofitting. So in the Great Depression, Roosevelt urged, do what you can with what you have where you are, which for me is Balsall Heath, a diverse inner city area, a 10-minute cycle ride south of Birmingham city centre. If you've heard of it at all, you may know Balsall Heath as the home of the Ladypool Road, important sort of Asian shopping area, the inventors of the Balti, the home of UB40, and the possibly you might know about the Moseley Road Baths, 1907, the swimming bath in oldest continuous use in the country. You may not know about the Al Abbas mosque, the first mosque in the UK to set up as a progressive COVID vaccination centre, the Bahu Trust, the only mosque globally accredited as UN observers at the Climate and Biodiversity Summits. And although Balsall Heath sadly had the worst COVID deaths in Birmingham, partly because our narrow frontage terraced houses, uninsulated, have this mould and damp which I've just talked about, and therefore led to pre-existing respiratory conditions, I nevertheless unbiasedly think we have the best we have the best community spirit in the country. We were invited to present the work of Retrofit Balsall Heath at the Birmingham Race Impact Group Summit in December, which was coordinated with the Integrated Care Trust, the Health Trust, as I've described. And Ranjit Sindhi described how Birmingham, the city of empire, has become the city of diversity. And I think it's no coincidence that housing typology and space standards and air quality and pollution and poverty and health and mental health and deprivation are often overlaid to some extent with ethnic diversity, sadly. It's the structural features, I suggest, of society, or he was suggesting, which have caused that we've created and can't be separated really from the urban environment. So this map shows the whole of Balsall Heath. It's 4,900 homes, 15,000 people. We have some beautiful terraced houses with lovely stone and brick details, solidly built, but in need of repair. This is Edgbaston, adjoining Balsall Heath, which has an 8 times denser area. The red circle is interesting. It's one of the avenues in Balsall Heath typology accessed by just a footpath without road frontages, car road frontages. We had Retrofit Balsall Heath is this local community group, perhaps a year or two old, but building on both local green initiatives going back 15 years, as thank you, Rev, for your introduction, not only to the zero carbon house, which I've described, but also building on Balsall Heath Forum's championing work in local participation in the 1990s. Retrofit Balsall Heath's first success was this local campaign victory, heat pumps, instead of polluting gas boilers, for a new 450 home development, which forced the developer to back down. And we campaigned for retrofit funding. And in contrast with the very low uptake that the City Council had with previous similar schemes, we've achieved 1,400 sign-ups, work to nearly 700 homes, has been underway for a year in Balsall Heath and surrounding areas with the Birmingham City Council Warmer Homes funding, and we're hoping to complete in the next few weeks by the end of August. So there's been a huge amount of work. But these are partial retrofit measures, averaging 10k per home, with LADS 3 criteria set in Westminster, including, but the measures include insulation, solar PV, windows and doors, heat pumps. A key part of our vision is that neighbourhood scale retrofit can't be top-down, designed in Whitehall, with a bit of community involvement. It must be community-led. We found that if the state does things to and for people, it will make us dependent. But a partnership that enables us to do things for ourselves makes us independent and proud. And as an aside, this leaflet was only designed by the community because Birmingham City Council were too busy with their marketing people putting on the Commonwealth Games, which I hugely salute last year, but it enabled us to get in by the back door and take more community control of this process. The resident-led housing action trusts from about 20, 30, 40 years ago prove that this approach really works and stands the test of time. They brought together local residents with legal, finance and design professionals, and I was privileged to be involved in the Castle Vale Housing Action Trust, the last phase of that. Our ambition is to have no one left behind, to make sure that every home excuse me. To make sure that every home in Balsall Heath is retrofitted, irrespective of ownership and tenure, street by street, as Lily has been advocating, reducing our energy needs by up to 80% and eradicating fuel poverty. That's our ambition. Balsall Heath's tightly packed terrace houses can be cost-effectively upgraded at scale, we think, rather than piecemeal house by house. We're wanting to value and connect with nature, especially for city dwellers far from rural England or rural Pakistan or wherever. So we've covered the why now, the what, the value of the home and Balsall Heath, and putting together the ideas that we've outlined so far and developed with our local Retrofit Balsall Heath group. Last summer, we co-created, as I've mentioned, the 4-day Retrofit Reimagined Festival in Birmingham, identifying the systemic changes we need on retrofit. We were covered by the Financial Times as Retrofit Radicals, proudly wearing that title, I think, and we asked a number of questions with acknowledgement to the work of Rob Hopkins, moving from what is to what if. What if we saw the current energy crisis as a crucial intervention point for bold and just transition? What if we understood the health and energy and housing and climate justice, all these crises to be inextricably linked, and we envisioned a courageous, interconnected approach to retrofitting our homes, our streets, our neighbourhoods? And I think, you know, whilst our national policy seems to be moving at a glacial pace, there are green shoots exemplified on the floor above, and do go and look at every panel there and take them in, make the links. There are green shoots happening, which I think is so exciting. It's really moving from the individual to the collective, I think. We've looked at how outreach has, we've had learning from the local MEC Trust, meeting people where they are. Why has my bill doubled? Sort of starting points, mugs of tea, community midwifery models with the continuity of care that those give, WhatsApp groups, energy cafes. Dan Hill from Dark Matter Labs says the most valuable commodity in retrofit is trust. Trust is fragile and slow growing. It can only be built up over decades, but tapping into those networks and building on them, with them, can be transformational. Our Wendy House retrofit drama, bottom left photo and very large photo, thank you Lucy, upstairs, shows that I think it's now toured 4 or 5 different cities, but it really sort of seems to communicate to people to get the message over. So another what is to what if, can we move from a centralized manufacturing model to a distributive by design one? What if we could have something like GP surgeries for retrofit, retrofit labs in each neighbourhood? We've got some signs that we're trying to work with. We haven't cracked this one yet in Balsall Heath, but we are talking to some people quite seriously about it. What if every neighbourhood invested in local skills, local knowledge, local jobs? And perhaps most powerfully of all, what if we move from house by house to street by street? It's increasingly apparent, I think, that individual fragmentation is neither efficient nor ambitious enough. If we move from these disconnected piecemeal approaches towards the whole home and a whole street, looking at deep retrofit that considers our streets, how we, as a complete sort of living system, when we're looking at air quality, biodiversity, soil quality, travel options. What if we saw the whole street as a living system, rich with infinite possibilities here? This is Melrose Avenue in Birmingham, 26 homes accessed via footpath. We saw earlier how a single house can be retrofitted with insulation, but in Balsall Heath we've found, as I said, this is about much more than just insulation. People are inspired by a much bigger vision in scope and in scale. What if we zoom out to the whole street, giving massive cuts, up to 80% in home energy each and every year? And I think we have a once-in-a-generation chance to do this deep retrofit, not a shallow retrofit. The costs of admin and labour and disruption and site overheads are all largely fixed. The extra incremental cost of thicker insulation is small but hugely worthwhile. If we can then meet those greatly reduced energy needs with renewables and low carbon heat pumps and so forth, if we can then give warm and healthy homes with huge improvements to people's health and well-being, using healthy building materials. One estimate, and there's good stuff on this in the exhibition upstairs, but one estimate gives 1.4 billion savings to our NHS currently treating cold home illnesses. And as I've said, our local integrated care system really have become enthusiastic champions of what we're trying to do, and they can see the benefits. What if we can give jobs, training and skills? We'd love to upskill experts who've lived in our area for decades and support them in accreditation to do the work and help to train others. Yes, there's a skills shortage, but we can create the infrastructure to train people, giving the right sort of economic growth. And we're inspired by models like people-powered retrofit in Manchester. Shared spaces, creating community spaces, looking out for our neighbours and so forth, thinking about transport choices, local parking and congestion problems, better public transport, rainwater, developing the circular economy, improving biodiversity and green spaces, and all of this with the arts integrally supporting the exploration and celebration. We're not perfect in Balsall Heath, we're learning as we go, but the resulting strengthening of community relationships, discussions, participation in creating good for all can be hugely helpful, has been for us in helping to create community resilience in testing times, and hope that will be no more deaths as we've seen, giving hope for these things. I warmly commend the One Planet Living principles. I won't go through them, but finally, what if we can move from short-term campaigns to a long-term local vision? What if the governance became hyper-local around conversations with local people? So I've talked about many of these points on the slide. We're celebrating, and I think particularly just picking up Lily's point, I'm not keen on the vocabulary of community consultation or community involvement or community tick boxing. I think a community-led partnership is what will be transformational for this work. We've been collaborating with 23 different local organisations, and we've had community workshops just recently. This was Letters from the Global South. Here's one of your world exclusives. Channel 4 have a forthcoming TV series on climate with a well-known presenter presenting in September. We had a fantastic open day a fortnight ago, and Rupert Reed, who's on that slide, from the Climate Majority Project, check it out if you don't know it, has been very supportive, and I hope we're supporting him as well. This is your second world exclusive. We're on a short list of 3 for the Academy of Urbanism Neighbourhood of the Year Award. I know I can't quite believe it, but you first heard it here. Retrofitting seems to feature in the citations. But I'm really proud that our local sixth formers have even developed a totally original board game, Climania, based on retrofit in Balsall Heath. Can you believe it? We've been, I think finally, these are words from Sheikh Nuru Mohammed at the launch of Retrofit Balsall Heath. When we come together as a community, not if, when we come together as a community, we can take this to the next level. We must retrofit, I think, not just our homes, but our politics, our economics, our communities, rediscover the shared values which make us human. And retrofit a cultural mindset which has put humanity in charge of the earth. So your third world exclusive, if you're inspired by anything I've said, these are to be revealed very shortly, the dates of the Retrofit Reimagined Festival. Come and join us if anything I've said resonates. We're going to be here in the Building Centre, happily hosted with this Retrofit 23 exhibition on the 28th of September in London, Birmingham the 15th, 16th of September in sunny Balsall Heath. I warmly invite you all here. You may say I'm a dreamer, but you want the evidence. A centre-right think tank, closing remark, Onward, has analysed learning from public investments over 60 years. The most successful schemes are those where communities have either have a big stake in the regeneration process, or where local people have been in charge of the priorities, the budgets, and building new community-level collaborations. They control, and this is a quote from that report, we must in short let communities take back control. Trust, love, respect. The future is community. Thank you.
So I think there's going to be a roving mic. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
So I'll have to start off with one question, but that will give you all the time to think of your own questions. So it's amazing, both of you. It's really incredible to see. I'm struck by many things. There are 2 things that I want to ask about. Something that you said is cost first, environment second, which I totally get. Now, you, John, talked about some amazing stuff with donut economics, with this incredible dark matters ecosystem of going from what you could do yourself through to what does DLUC do. So, but thinking of that donut economic kind of theory, and then thinking about it's about cost. That's not about environmental value. That's direct cost to me or to my family. What are the steps that you can talk to us about in numbers of direct money, indirect value, grants that you've achieved that actually makes the donut economic theory real and bringing it home to
place and streets.
Do you want to go first?
No, you're welcome to go first.
I'm welcome to go first.
And it's got to be real numbers. It can't be like sort of because it's a good thing.
I agree, and I think we need to move beyond a model that is sort of, you know, the economic model that we're in has got us to this point, and I think, you know, Kate Raworth's economics are, you know, are by a world-renowned economist, but it's just, I think she talks about what you value, and, you know, if you talk about growth, it's growth of what, at what cost, for whose benefit, at what cost to the planet, etc., etc. So I think we just need to recalibrate what we're measuring, why we're measuring it, and how we're measuring it. And so, you know, I quoted a saving to the NHS, etc. We're working with dark matter labs at the moment. In fact, the collaboration with the health authority, the integrated care system in Birmingham that I talked about, we're actively working with dark matter labs to see how can that be quantified. We're discussing, you know, this hasn't come to fruition yet, this is embryonic, but what we, as an instance, what we're discussing is that medically some conditions are sort of, you know, will only transform over a generation. But asthma is one that apparently the medics say they can turn around quite quickly. So if we can target homes where people are asthmatic, we can turn those around, we can retrofit those. We then have an evidence base that we can say, look, this is what we're doing. And I think, you know, at this stage, I won't pretend it's about any more than trying to establish the evidence base for these things. But we are looking at some of these things, and I think in the Retrofit Reimagined Festival last year, we had some fantastic people, Bankers Without Boundaries, who feature on Lucy's panel upstairs about finance, who are looking at how you look at an investable thing here, and pension funds investing over 60 years, I think, are really interested in units of 6,000 homes, apparently. That's a kind of investable model for them, because, you know, every home will be different, some will work, some won't work, some will end up using more energy because they, you know, human beings are like that. But those are the sort of crumbs. You know, I think we do need a big investment, and I think I think, you know, the figure in my mind is 45k per home. Some of you may have been at the which for Balsall Heath would then be 220 million, perhaps over quite a number of years. But some of you may have been on the UK Green Buildings Council call, I think this week, launching a national campaign. Interestingly, 42% of the people on that call said we need more than 600 billion to do this. They're looking to establish an industry consensus around what the ask should be for the political parties for the next election. Okay. So there are some big numbers.
Lily, do you want anything to...
So I think from my perspective, there's kind of two angles to your question. And I think the one side is around the communications and how you speak to people about this topic and what are the angles that you go through. And just to clarify, if they want to talk about the environment, we'll talk about the environment. We'll start with that as the primary motivation. But by and large, what you find is that, you know, it comes at a cost, or people see it as coming at a cost. And so it's important. They'll say, there's lots I want to do, and I want to do this for my children, and I want to upgrade our homes, but it's got to save me money. You know, we're in a cost of living crisis. So I think from a comms perspective, or, you know, more just how to speak to people perspective, it's making it relevant to them, working out what their motivations are, what they're interested in, and really condensing it down and distilling what you're talking about to make it relevant to people's lives. So we're talking about the environment, we're talking about upgrading homes, but actually it's that draft is really a problem when you live in Glasgow and you've got a really chilly home and your kids are running around, or you're working from home. You're going to the office because you don't want to work from home and it will save you on energy. It's those sorts of things around making your home warmer, making it more comfortable, that will resonate with people. And it's understanding where to go from there, what to lead on to get through with such a complex topic. And then I think the other side is around impact and how you talk about projects like this and the impact it's having, and storytelling. So I think measurement-wise, we've obviously got KPIs around, hopefully, carbon reduction that we have at a street level, cost savings at a street level and really condensed down into ways that are meaningful and people actually understand what it means and cash in their pocket, you know, in the first year or much, much further down the line, payback. But that's great, but if you don't have the stories alongside it and more of the qualitative insights that we'll get from these sorts of projects where we're able to interview people and really hear from people and put them front of the stage. Because when you go through an impact report, you go to the case studies, you just want to read about Sue and like what happened to Sue and, like, in the project and like the difference that's made. And there's only so much that can go with stats and the quant of it.
Yeah, very good, very good. Some people want to talk about stories. I think, yeah, some people want to talk about other things, but there's brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. I'd love to ask, does anybody else have, I mean, I was going to ask John whether John's got a grant from the NHS to do with the reduction of
Not yet, no.
So keep working on that. But if anybody has, tell me if anybody has a kind of one of these holistic grants that do the full circle of, you know, public health benefits to actually input into retrofit, for instance. Did you have one?
No, I had a question.
Okay, you had a question, but tell me afterwards. I'm trying to collect these kind of, you know, these economic things. I mean, there is the, you know, Eco Plus, which is you know, which is maybe what your OVO energy is to do with. But there's Eco, which is the energy company obligation. So that's kind of getting money from the people who are creating the carbon emissions in the first place and solving the problem. That kind of thing, I think, will drive things if the stories and the impact is there and the community is there. But tell me more about that. Okay, so we had a question. So let's go into questions. We had a question.
Yeah, I'm going to break the statement first. I think we need to be wary of talking about eco because the amount of homes that's delivering is, I think in a year it delivered less than we need to deliver in a day. So it's not quite getting there. Second of all, I'm going to ask a question to both of you. I think it's amazing, really inspiring, totally the right thing we should be doing, going to community members who already know how to talk to people in the local area, who already have lots of connections, who understand human psychology. I found everything you were saying fascinating, Lily. I wondered, in terms of your team, Lily, and the people you were working with, and in terms of the people that you work within the community, John, how much training and upskilling do those people need in terms of like the technicalities of retrofit in order to be able to communicate this to the communities? Is it a lot, and how do you do that?
None. None whatsoever. So specifically for this project, our community coordinator is more centred around being a voice for the community, chatting, coordinating, being a voice on the ground. And she may well go ahead with certain measures. She might get insulation, she might get heat pumps or whatever it might be. So she'll have that experience. But we felt with this project it was really important to have us as kind of laymen in a way and advocating for the community, and also them going through the experience together. I think it's more important that we're able to speak to people and bring people on board rather than specific training on retrofit, because it's not around sort of that's not what we're trying to do with this trial. But then we've got OVO Energy Solutions who are those experts and have all of that expertise to give.
In Walsall Heath, it's slightly different. We're working with a trust called the MEC Trust, which was originally set up to help unemployed people get into work again, and has then morphed into helping people navigate grants and all that sort of thing. They've got a wonderful purple van, which has been out on the street doing advocacy, and I didn't say it, but it was in one of the slides, going around to where people are, meeting people, setting up in a park on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And they have actually trained up, I think, 5 people now to different levels with retrofit skills, home energy advice and that sort of thing. I myself have trained up as a retrofit coordinator, relatively recently qualification for those who aren't aware of it, and mentored 2 other people in the local community who have done that. And as part of the social value for this contract, which seems to be taking an interminable time, must have had 30 meetings where this has been brought up, we're trying to get the social value of this contract to train up a dozen young people is the ask, young people from the neighbourhood, at first in assessment skills and those sorts of things, but also in looking at training and so forth. So I think, so that's the kind of specific answer. I think the broader answer is really just meeting people where they are. Some people are kind of, what does this fuel bill mean, and that sort of thing. So, you know, you could say that is an upskilling, it's a first step on the journey. Others have been like the nature map, where we're kind of moving people from the environment doesn't matter to actually maybe the environment does matter. So, you know, in a sense, that is an upskilling and a training. And I think there are different levels. And, you know, at the other extreme, there are people who've been inspired and have started to have work done under the scheme that we've got, have learnt a lot about it. Jude and Steve wanted to... I think there's an echo on this, I don't know why. Jude and Steve had wanted to have their walls insulated. The scheme we've got couldn't afford it, but they've got solar panels. But they have then gone ahead and they have done their own wall insulation. And so for them, I've been hugely involved technically in a lot of stuff. So, you know, Steve is now, he's quite a handyman, he's upskilled in condensation risk, etc. So.
Thank you. Good question. There's a question down here.
Yeah, this is directed to both people, really, both communities. I wondered what the mix of tenures were. How many owner-occupiers, how many social landlords, how many private landlords, and what does that say in terms of both problems and opportunities, if you like?
Vast majority are homeowners, and then a small number are renters. And we did want to go for a mix of income, not income levels, that was part of it, but also tenures. But we did find that actually of the 15 applications that applied, that was mostly what people, the situation for people. And I assume because if you've got some understanding of the retrofit landscape and what's available to you, know it's going to be more doable. Or you might just be completely put off if you are a renter, by and large, because you think it's not available to you. But it wasn't something that we, you know, tried to exclude people from, but that's what we found came to us when they applied.
Our vision is very much about no one left behind. But you know, I'll give you an honest answer because we're not yet there. On the road I showed you, Melrose Avenue, we signed up, it's 28 homes, we signed up 95% of the people on that, of all sorts of different tenures. And at the time we were assured by the City Council that if we had a number in a row, and the LADS funding, which is what we tapped into, was specifically directed by Westminster to owner-occupiers and private renters. But we were told, OK, if we've got a number of those and we've got some housing associations in between, we can bring in other funding to do that, infill funding. For whatever reasons of the bureaucracy, sadly, that hasn't happened on this scheme. But we are now actively, with the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund money, which is coming into the area, we're trying to collaborate with those. And on this vexed question of the Eco4 funding, we found some people who did get solar panels but are still eligible for wall insulation, so we're looking to do that. So I think it's a work in progress, but I think I think if we can, you know, as an industry, as a community, as a country, if we can hold on to the idea that we do this street by street, we make it work the way that the tenure is, then I think it's you know, it's quicker, it's easier, it's much simpler to organise. All these logistic issues of, you know, do I need to move out, disruption, scaffolding and everything, if we can do it across all tenures, I think that has to be the only sensible answer, really. So we need to work on the funding so that we can get back to that. But that's sort of honest work in progress at the moment.
Fantastic. Did you have any... did you work with any landlords of the
yes, we have.
The
yes.
tenants?
Yes.
And did that, because that's the kind of one of the issues with the, you know, the residents who rent, could you get at the landlords, and did they work with their tenants to...
It wasn't always straightforward, but I mean, what we found in Balsall Heath is that, in fact, some of the landlords, you know, one has this perhaps kind of stereotype of a remote sort of landlord who's not caring. But in Balsall Heath, we found that quite a number of the landlords actually lived in the same road or whatever. You know, we've got a lot of multi-generational households, and housing was very cheap in the 70s in Balsall Heath. There were actually a lot more owner-occupiers than you might imagine. The bureaucracy, again, on this scheme we've done was difficult. That, you know, there were forms that went out to landlords, they signed them, then there was an error on the form and they were all sent out again, and half of them said, I'd already signed this, and then they were told the dates had been missed, and then... But this is all the bureaucracy of a top-down system. If we were able to do this in the community, then we would be able to shortcut all that and make it much more efficient. But it certainly has worked, although it's been a bit more complicated because you've got more parties to yeah. And on the scheme we were working with, the landlords needed to make about a contribution of 1/3, so that some of them weren't onto or weren't able to do that. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you both for your contributions. I wanted to ask a very specific question to Lily, which was, what was the offer from OVO Energy Consultancy? Was it to a whole house plan for a deep retrofit, or was it purpose made to what people wanted? Because you were saying cost was primary. So, I mean, my feeling is that we should, in a way, be aiming high, even if people do it step by step. So I just was curious about how you were managing sort of, or how the consultants were responding to what people wanted.
And I can see how something I've said is potentially confusing things, because I've probably got the jargon wrong. But the full home review will give them all the options that they can potentially have, and they don't have to take them all on all at once. It can be, as you say, it can be measure by measure. So they can start out with just capital one insulation.
So in a way, they have the same approach to each house, and then people pick from a menu. So, exactly. It's about creating an aspiration of, in a way where it's similar to, in a way where the sort of a bottom-up approach to what the Green Building Council are trying to do is actually, what are we trying to achieve? And I think whole host plans are a way of kind of making that more real and practical for people in particular communities and for particular types of houses. So I think that's really important.
Fantastic. Anyone got a question?
Yeah, thank you for everything you've described, because it's heartwarming to see those types of projects happening. Question from me was, you're all doing your own projects. You're all going through the same process and probably repeating the same problems, the same issues. Do you think that that's a key part in building that kind of community spirit? And how do we shortcut that process for other areas that want to do the same thing?
I think you should go first, because we were talking about this.
I think, firstly, the Retrofit 23 exhibition here is fantastic at bringing people together. Events like this, I've had a very productive hour catching up with Lily before this. I think we all need to support one another in what we're doing. Secondly, I hope the Retrofit Reimagined, both last year and coming up this year, as I have given you this world exclusive, come along if you can. We want to get, we want to get a building of consensus on this. Thirdly, the National Retrofit Hub now exists, and very proud we have one of the co-chairs here today with us to act as a resource, really gathering information and to make it transparently available for people to demystify the process. So I think all these are answers to the question. But I was just saying to Lily earlier, actually, when we had the Retrofit Reimagine Festival last year, the energy at the end of that 4-day festival, I've never experienced anything like it. It was, the best way I can describe it is, imagine you were alive in 1948 and somebody said, right, we're going to have a national health service. you know, the energy of doing that from the system, a broken system which was there before. That is the energy with the people I'm talking to, which is around on this. We just need to get together. I don't think we can wait for Westminster to do the right thing, but you know, a moment of epiphany came for me actually up in Glasgow at COP26 on a big march with Greta at the front. We had a big Balsall Heath banner. We had Scottish bagpipers playing, riffing with Sikh drummers who were talking about, and I just thought, yes, you know, it's not coming from the conference halls. The energy is bottom up. That's when I say at the end of my talk, the future is community. We just need to do it, and I think the tidal wave will break. But we need, you know, we need to collaborate very closely with each other to learn the lessons, to, you know, to network and just not wait for anyone else, really, I think.
Yeah, totally agree with everything John said. And just to say, I think part and parcel of deciding how to share your impact and what your findings from a project is also, can we give this away? Who can we collaborate with? How can we make this bigger? So it might well be an approach that we can scale up with Over Energy Solutions, or we might well say there's a really obvious role for this community group doing great work. And one of Hubbub's criteria for a project is, could someone else do this? You know, is someone else doing this? There's no point replicating something that already exists. So I think part of that final stage of working out what's next with a project is partly, can we collaborate and make this bigger? And as John said, there's loads of working groups going on. We're all constantly talking and sharing findings and applying for grant funds together and collaborating. So there's definitely appetite there. And I think to answer the second part of your question, which I think was around speeding up that community spirit and kind of replicating this more widely, something we were talking about is there will be groups like the group in Glasgow who are quite interested in the topic and they're sort of early adopters. And then there's going to be other groups who don't know what retrofit is, and they're not even started on the journey. So in fact, it's all about tapping into the groups that already exist. Are there mums groups? Is there a really great mosque nearby? Is there a great community group going on? And start there and talk about food, or talk about food waste, or other things that matter to people, cycling. And then from there, you'll find organically, and this is happening in communities around the country, that's happening organically. They're finding constant solutions to environmental issues that don't need a project manager.
But maybe following on from that question is could you both explain the mechanics of how you can provide the amazing time that you're putting into it? I think there's something, I guess, about being sponsored by OVO. Is that right? Or how do you...
So we're putting in money alongside OVO.
But how do you... From Hubbub. And how does Hubbub get that money?
So we are funded on a project-by-project basis. So there might be a project. Projects can come about in all sorts of ways, but a company might come to us and say, we've got this environmental issue, solve it, help us solve it. Or it might be that we've got a great idea, like with this trial we thought it was creative, interesting, and wanted to run with it. So we've put some funding in, and OVO have also put some funding in. But we also get funding from Starbucks, who are our main funder. So This is the 5p cup charge. So if you buy a coffee from Starbucks, there's a 5p charge on that coffee, and it goes to Hubbub.
How amazing. Right.
So that's our funding.
Gotcha. And And hang on. And John?
We were fortunate in that when the Birmingham City Council bid was put together, there was a very enlightened person, Ying Man. Some of you may know him. He worked with Russell Smith, Retrofit Works previously, who was the retrofit coordinator. And he fought hard and put a sum of money in for community. Nobody quite knew what it was. And that money has really gone to pay for the MEC Trust to be involved. So about 6 of them have been involved. I'm fortunate in that I'm a freelance architect and I've sort of stopped taking on any other projects, but my time has been funded and I'm just throwing everything at this for now. So that's not a sustainable model, but we're trying to work
funded by this trust, this kind of Birmingham City Council trust or?
Well, no, it was a public procurement contract, and so it had to go through all those stages. There's part of it which is social value, which is one of the criteria, so it's not just lowest cost. And part of that social value has been sort of earmarked to do what we can with the community part of this. Okay. So it's not yet, hand on heart, it's not yet a sustainable, financially replicable model. But what we're really trying to do is just to pioneer the territory, to chart it out and to do what we can with very, very little resources at the moment, but to show, and I hope I've demonstrated to you tonight a bit of the buzz of what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's imperfect, it's not properly resourced, it's kind of, we're doing it anyway, and we want to make it happen. And if anyone knows philanthropic funders, I'd be very pleased to be introduced, because we do need,
The other, I mean, why? Volunteers and goodwill. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why I think that question's really, and because maybe some of the people here in this audience would love to get more into this. They love the stories that you're telling and the incredible effect that you're having. But that, like, how did you get into it might relate to people here who would like to get into it but don't know the roots to it. So what would you say to people who might be doing an amazing job as a consultant or whatever you all are doing, but you want to get into this world? What would you say? How would you suggest these people get into doing something similar to what you're doing?
I would say, start, as Lily has just said very eloquently, start where the community is. Don't go and set up something and ask people to join it. Tap into the rhizome which is there in any community, even if it looks impoverished. There are, mosques, churches, community centres, schools, etc.
Yep.
Tap into what's happening. Don't set up something else. Secondly, find someone who understands how to apply for lottery funds and those sorts of things. Start small, grow it, make it happen. But in a sense, the capital funding, for retrofitting houses is big. But even without that, we can start with the buzz that that Lily is creating and others, people-powered retrofit are creating, and I hope a bit we're creating in Balsall Heath.
Amazing. I love it. Right, I'm going to.
Lily, you may have other answers to that.
Any other answers?
No, I'm good. We're good.
Okay.
We covered it.
We've got a question over here.
Can I put a plug in?
No, you
No,
can't.
wait.
There's a question over here. You can in a minute.
That being said, do you have any resources that you recommend for if you're in a block of flats that wants to do something like this, or is it not quite there yet with retrofitting blocks, or it's specific to London, or?
There's just super quickly, there's an amazing group in Glasgow looking at specifically that, and I can't remember the name, but I will find it for you, and I'll find you, and I'll give it to you.
And there's one of the Glasgow tenements upstairs, which has been done by what are they called?
It's Nidri Road, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the same principles, more or less, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get everyone, is it rented flats or privately owned flats? Yeah. So I think the first thing is to get everyone together, and I think the economies of scale of doing the whole thing and the potential for energy networks and those sorts of things are fantastic if you can get everyone together. So
You don't think it's like people owning their homes and wanting to take responsibility, or having that ownership is not a paralyzing factor in the retrofit?
Well, I think clearly that different tenures have different implications. But if it's more difficult to get the owners on board, if that's what you're feeling, I would say that the advantages for the owners are that the value of their flats will go up, their bills will go down. They don't want to be the one that's left out if the whole block is done except for them.
Yeah, but you couldn't do the whole block except one.
Well, in the 80s in Birmingham, whole terraces were done, and one mean person didn't want to be part of it. So, it might be a useful card to play to get them on board.
It's a super question. I'd also say from the council-owned homes, get in touch with your beloved local authority. Somebody like me, if you're in Enfield, but there'll be somebody else wherever you are, who is trying to grapple with all of these issues, and that that may be the impetus. If there's a community impetus, that may be the thing that gets those council
They'd be delighted to hear from you, because you will then meet whatever is coming top down, if it is.
and that they will be desperate for community help to try and persuade all the leaseholders to partake in a scheme.
Be a deal maker, build a partnership.
Yeah. Sorry, yes, your follow-on could quickly follow.
Thanks. To encourage people to get involved in the Architects Climate Action Network. And I mean, obviously we're a organised network of built environment professionals, but a lot of us are involved in community initiatives too. So it's
amazing.
And I'm the coordinator, one of the coordinators of the existing building group. So come and talk to me afterwards if you're interested.
I will be one of those people to come and talk to you. Thank you. Yes.
Just to add to that aspect about all the different partners, not ruling out diverse partners who you can work with. I mean, recently Extinction Rebellion coordinated Housing Rebellion, which was right across the country. And if you just hashtag Housing Rebellion, you may well find all sorts of people all over the country who are doing stuff, renting, all sorts. And we've certainly networked very closely with our local group. In fact, our Mendy House was made by local Birmingham Extinction Rebellion. So, you know, we really need to work at all levels, and, you know, the Climate Majority Project, which you mentioned as well. So it's working, and the Warm This Winter campaign, it's actually bringing those connections between what's happening with our homes and then what's the wider, bigger context of the crisis that we're in.
Good stuff. And I think that was a statement, not a question.
Yes, I apologise.
If I had missed a question, then tell me. Thank you. Any other? Yeah.
This one's a question.
Hey.
It may actually be for you. So building on your question a bit, I was wondering if there are any projects that any of you know about that have involved blocks of flats with local authority as the freeholders, with communal heating systems.
Yes.
Someone tell me.
There's a project in the exhibition which is with Thurrock, and it is a retrofit of 3 tower blocks with ground source heat pumps. So there's lots of details up on that.
Okay, because I was just wondering about the particular obstacles you might run into trying to get something like that.
It's quite interesting actually, because that project was very much community led, and they actually they mocked up a dummy apartment in the foyer that the residents could come down and learn about the equipment, how to use it, and it was a huge success. I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but it's up there, it's up in the exhibition, but it was quite interesting what came off the back of it, because initially there was a lot of people that was quite reticent about it happening, but the moment that was put in place, the attitudes changed with the residents, and there's some great feedback from it, because it's been completed. There's been great feedback from the residents in terms of the savings to their energy bills.
And can I ask, how was it funded?
It was funded through the council.
Through the council?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if I could. I mean, there are some. We've done some similar ground source heat pump projects, and it's one of the architect's greatest challenges, I think. You know, if you thought of what could you do in terms of what was the most difficult thing of the most difficult thing of the most difficult thing of the most difficult thing, it's not new build stuff. It's the retrofit of 1960s council mixed tenure with like 40% sold units built in the 60s with large panel systems. So I don't know why anybody might be being an architect designing new buildings anymore, because that's the most difficult challenge.
And, you know, the exemplary scheme at the moment must be Park Hill in Sheffield, where I think the second phase has just won quite a number of awards and is well worth looking at in detail.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentations. My first question is, how would the VAT on retrofit, how would that have helped your individual projects? And the second thing about, it's always good to hear successful examples of retrofits, especially for communities who want to go down that option. And when regeneration is brought up, option 1 is usually the retrofit is the least preferred option to the third and fourth option, which is like demolition, new build. So how can we just flip that around?
Retrofitting existing homes rather than demolition. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Because it's always brought up as like the first option, but that's not it's not, whether it's a council or a council working with a preferred developer, or in other ways, like the council are quite happy to show off or talk about their retrofit projects, but it would just be like 6 homes which they've retrofitted, when in fact they need to be retrofitting 1,000, and not being invited to like panels to talk about their 6 homes when they should be doing a lot more.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot of work happening in this area. I think it's a really good question, really important, burning question. Firstly, I would signpost you to a webinar on this, which the Architects Climate Action Network had about a month ago. It's on the Architects Climate Action Existing Buildings Network forum, which Susie flagged earlier. And part of the webinar was about people in London flats, particularly where the whole thing seems to be just demolish them, you know, make it so unpleasant that people move out, their leases run down, etc., etc. There's also a campaign in Birmingham for Druids Heath, which is 1960s system-built housing, and they want to demolish a lot of it, but people want to stay there. They want to do it first. So I think there's a huge social justice issue here, and dare I say, I think it goes back to a donut economics issue that I was, you know, if we can look at a new paradigm where we're actually valuing the things that people value and the sense of community which is there. People have lived in that house, and you know, perhaps they're happy to move out for a month whilst work is done, but then they want to move back next to their neighbours. I think all that sort of social sustainability, if you like, I think people are beginning to understand a lot more, but I think it needs a lot of campaigning at the moment, to be honest, because the system is not yet where it needs to be. But you know, if you're involved in any of those sorts of things, I would really encourage you to reach out to other people who are campaigning in that area, because I sense there's quite a groundswell there, and it will meet the groundswell, which is, you know, I don't think we've heard from Michael Gove about the M&S building today, have we? So I hope it'll be tomorrow, which is, for those who don't know it, there's a building on Oxford Street, which Marks & Spencer's own, which Michael Gove is going to rule at a planning inquiry whether it can be demolished or not. And there's a huge environmental, we have one of the expert witnesses in the room here today, Barbara, but there's a huge environmental argument that they should keep that existing building and not demolish it. And I think part of the evidence was that, you know, demolishing that building would be throwing a huge carbon bomb into the atmosphere now at these crucial 7 or 8 years or whatever when we need to reduce things. So I think that agenda will meet this social agenda, and I think just go for it. You know, if you're involved, you know others who are. I think it's really important.
And the VAT thing, it is crazy. Obviously, I think it's gone back down to 5% for energy and insulation measures from 20 to 5, but not 0 yet. So there is some movement on that. But it's, campaigning. And it's, you know, everything one can do and say and suggest is kind of political in a way, you know, because we're all part of this. It's an ecosystem, and that's what we've seen. It's a huge ecosystem, and it can't be left to, you know, somebody else sorting it out. And we've all got a voice to try and get to the right direction.
And perhaps I can just report, there was I heard a report of a Chatham House session earlier this week where there's been talk of should new build VAT come down to 7% and new build go up to 7% and retrofit go down to 7%. That's one idea which has been mentioned. But I think perhaps the much better way would be to put VAT on new build, to disincentivise it and to take it off retrofit. Another proposition we had at the Retrofit Reimagined Festival was rather than help to buy, which feels the new have help to retrofit. It's just a diversion. There are lots of smart, intelligent ways of, you know, the money is there, of just getting it to do what we all think it should be doing.
So, fantastic. Really good. Really, really good. So, I think unless there are any other burning questions.
Just a comment on sharing information.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to comment on sharing information. I personally would value being part of a chat group with everybody in this room, because I think we've all got similar questions and hopefully some people have got the answers to them. Is there an area where you're already doing that? And if so, can you share that?
There's the Architect Climate Action Network Existing Buildings Group. I don't know if you are an architect or if, which I think is open to non-architects to join.
There's a group called Retrofit Rendezvous, and it makes me laugh every time I go on it because it's very fancy. But it's great. It's on Guild, which I think is quite an easy platform, quite iterative to get used to. And there's loads of conversations on there. There's Retrofit Academy are on there. Yeah, all sorts of organisations, and there's loads going on, lots of conversations.
The Carbon Co-op in Manchester is open to members across the country.
Yeah,
you can join up, and there's a huge amount of stuff they're doing.
And then you're in a chat group, Carbon Co-op.
Carbon Co-op.
Or People Powered Retrofit, it goes on both names.
Yeah.
You can come to me. Carbon Co-op. What was there was fancy Retrofit Rendezvous, and there was. What was the other name for Carbon Co-op?
People Powered Retrofit.
People Powered Retrofit. Yeah. Okay. And
Yes.
right. Very good.
And there may be. Can we clear the floor, Chair? Others may know other groups that.
Any other groups? Well, should we take one last question, and then we're going to stop. But no, we're not going to stop. We're going to move. There's a pub opposite the road, opposite the, I don't know where I'm pointing. The College Arms. But yeah, last question.
Sorry about it. Well, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. Definitely, I can tell that you are both very involved citizens and very smart experts. So I want to make a question to John in particular, because I can tell that what the most inspiring thing of your project is that it has like a co-creation. It's a co-creation process with the community, but I think it has a lot of you in there. So I really appreciate that. So I was just wondering, how do you feel that younger generations envision a retrofit ecosystem in the large future, like thinking about your neighborhood, your area, and the insightful projects that you have on mind, like how do you feel younger generations engage with those environments and co-created with the community? And how do you feel that this could encompass with a regeneration process with a local council, but also with a city council?
Well, thank you for the question. And I think if it were not a co-creation, if it were a creation of one person, it would fail. And I think we've held Retrofit Balsall Heath meetings purposefully in different locations every time. In mosques, in churches, in community centres, in halls, in a park, one quite recently, where there were a whole lot of it happened to be young black people sitting on a wall smoking, and we were talking to them, and we had the retrofit protest bike, which featured in one of the slides here, and everyone wanted to go on the bike, and so it's a way in to then start to have those conversations. In fact, I mean on that occasion, a lot of the conversations were around the Windrush anniversary, which was at that time. But I think once you're in conversation with someone, you can take them with you. And I think the Climania game invented by local sixth formers, I think it's really important to reach out to youth as well. But I should say as well that the Mech Trust, who I've mentioned a couple of times in Balsall Heath, by the admission of one of their directors, a year ago they knew nothing about retrofit, and now they're making films about it, they're proudly advocating it, they are sort of, seeing themselves as leaders in the community. So I think it needs, it needs that co-creation, that co-leadership to make it, once the ball is rolling, then it can snowball, and absolutely we need to get everyone on board. But I think, when you think, what do people get up to? People people want to be part of something. And I think as not only the climate crisis, but all these intersecting crises bite, I think just the fact of getting together to do something positive, I think the power of that can't be underestimated. And I referred to the Balsall Heath Forum earlier and their pioneering work in this area, which was bringing people together and planters and those sorts of things. And if actions like that can then start to reduce crime and poverty and all those sorts of indicators for the good, how much more can this retrofit as part of a kind of retrofit our homes, our communities, our hearts and minds.
Great stuff. Hearts and minds. So on that, let's bring this to a close. There is an incredible exhibition upstairs, but it is closing in a few minutes for today. But it is open until, John, when is it open until?
We're extending it through to the 3rd week of October.
And extending it by popular demand because it's so fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's that. There's the College Arms over the road, which I think we're, if you can spare a few moments coming along to that. But I'd just like to thank, firstly, Patty and John for hosting this at the Building Centre, for Lucy Bullivant for an amazing curated show, and to finish thanking Lily and John for an incredible, inspiring, life-changing talk.
Not forgetting Rafe as well.
Thank you very much. Good stuff. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Very good. Cool.
Brilliant.